pulling off an upset win in the wild card round, which team looks to be the most likely team that can do that? First of all, I want to make it clear, just being the lowest seed does not automatically mean that you're pulling an upset. It usually means that you're pulling an upset if you're the lowest seed, but it doesn't always mean that if you're the lowest seed, you are pulling off an upset. I'll give you an example. In the 2023 NFL Wild Card round, for the January 2023 playoffs, that is, we saw the New York Giants upset the Minnesota Vikings. That's an upset because the Vikings were the 3 seed, the Giants were the 6 seed, and even though the Vikings had a negative point differential, so did the Giants. The Giants' differential is actually even worse than the Vikings. And the Giants also had 3.5 fewer wins than them. In case you're wondering, they were 9-7-1, which technically equates to 9.5 wins and 7.5 losses. The Vikings were 13-4 and actually, had a normal record, one that doesn't involve a tie. Now, in the case of the Giants, it was pulling off an upset because, number one, the Vikings had defeated them, just weeks earlier than that, 27-24. It all came down to a 60-plus field goal attempt, which the Vikings actually nailed. And, you just got to think as to how the Minnesota Vikings really came into this as a very powerful team. And the reason why I say they pulled off an upset in the wild card round, and by the way, we're not going to talk about the divisional round until we at least know what the wild card bracket's going to be. But in the situation, the Vikings were the favorites to win. But like Bucks Cowboys, it's I guess it's kind of an upset in a way. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 8-9, while the Dallas Cowboys were 12-5. But the Cowboys hadn't won a road playoff games in over 3 decades prior. I think it was exactly 3 decades prior, since 1992. And Dallas has never beaten Tom Brady before. So, it was tough to say. But then again, the Falcons, just before that, they got their first win over Brady. And made his last regular season loss a loss against the Atlanta Falcons to somewhat compensate for their 28-3 loss to them. Well, no, their blown 20-3 lead to them in Super Bowl 51. And obviously the competition only got even more ferocious when Brady signed with the Buccaneers, which are Falcons' rival. And the Falcons kind of just stay at their low levels while the Buccaneers surge, a team that was terrible for years. So, in a way, it was kind of an upset that the Cowboys won, just based on the history between the two teams and the Cowboys' history in general. But when you also look at it, Buccaneers had higher seeding, but you also have to deal with the fact that the Dallas Cowboys had 4 more wins over the Buccaneers. So it's not exactly the easiest thing in the world to call it the upset. Finally, you also have the case of the Jaguars being the Chargers. Jaguars were the higher seed, yes, but they were 9-8 and the Chargers were 10-7. And really all signs indicated towards the Jaguars losing this game. And they were down 27-0. And yet they still won. Arguably 2 teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs. The Jaguars let themselves be down 4 scores, and the Chargers somehow blew a 4-score lead. It's not really football, because football is supposed to be a game in which it's kept relatively close. In this case, you just had one side get a huge lead and slowly lose it. And I gotta say, credit to the Jaguars. They forced, they got 5 turnovers. They didn't force the Chargers to turn the ball over at all, and they still won. So kudos to the Jaguars for doing that. But yeah, Jaguars pulled the upset. So in the NFL last year, the Jaguars were higher seeding, and yet they still pulled the upset. the Giants is lowest seeding pulled the upset, and whether or not the Cowboys pulled an upset or not, I'll let you debate that. But this year, you have to look at it in a bit of a different perspective. You also have to look at it in the lens of we don't know what's going to happen yet. We don't know what is going to happen yet. First of all, we're going to look at the AFC first because it's a little bit less complicated than the NFC. Even though only one seed is filled, the one seed, and that seed is actually not even going to be, the 1, 3, and 5 are filled. Okay, yeah. Yeah, AFC is definitely a lot easier than the NFC in that case. Okay, so in the AFC, you have the Baltimore Ravens at the number 1 seed. The number 2 seed is going to be determined as the last game in Sunday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Should the Dolphins lose, they get the number 6 seed. But the Bills, they have a lot to lose. If the Bills lose, the best they can get is the number 7 seed. Because should they lose, they're going up against, the winner of the Colts-Texans game is going to get the 7th seed. So, the winner of the Colts-Texans game is going to make the playoffs. So, the Texans have a 6-5 conference record right now. The Colts are 7-4. The Bills are 6-5. Should they lose, their conference record falls to a flat even 6-6. It does. They have a flat even 6-6 conference record, and you can look at reasons why. They lost to the Broncos, they lost to the Bengals, they lost to the Jets, they lost to the Patriots, they lost to the Jaguars. That's why they have 5 losses in their conference. Meanwhile, look at the Texans, and they had some, pretty bad losses as well. Texans definitely had some pretty bad losses, but the Texans also had important wins in their conference, so they're 6-5. Colts are doing even better in their conference right now. They're 7-4 in their conference. So if the Bills lose, the best they can do is a 7 seed, unless you have a very weird case of a Texans-Colts tie. By the way, in the event of a Texans-Colts tie, it's possible that both teams miss out. It's impossible for, both to get in at 9-7-1. They could both miss out if the Steelers beat the Ravens. If the Steelers lose, it is going to be the Colts because the Colts did beat them, the Texans in week 2. Wait. Oh, no, I was talking about the Bills. The Colts did beat the Texans in week 2. So as a result, we have that going for them. The other wild card for Buffalo is, should the Jaguars lose and they fall to 9-8, it's very hard for the Jaguars to then make the playoffs. My scenario kind of involves the Jaguars being the Titans because they are the literal Tennessee Titans. But the Miami Dolphins couldn't beat them. So not totally out of the realm of possibilities for Jacksonville to lose that game. But as far as, but for the sake of simplicity in my video, I will be making predictions for games. I'm not making assumptions, I'm making predictions. And then from there, I'm taking my predictions and forming a more educated model of what I think is going to happen. These are not assumptions, these are predictions. Although in some cases, I'm not going to obviously account for error because this video will take an hour. And I don't have a screen in front of me to magically give me all the numbers. Okay. So, number 1, for the sake of simplicity, a Colts-Texans tie is not happening. Even though they tied less than 2 years ago, for the sake of my video, I'm not going to assume the Colts and Texans tie. Because if I assume the Colts and Texans tie, if I make that assumption, then everything gets thrown into a colossal haywire because then I have to deal with the fact that, I have to then deal with the fact that, if we have a tie between these two teams, everything gets ugly. We're not going to say there's a tie and if it does, that will just be just weird. I think the NFL is also making this assumption on winning in, and they're not really factoring in a tie as of this moment. But a tie would eliminate the Houston Texans, and it might also get the Indianapolis Colts kicked out. That's, I think, the only way that both the Bills and Steelers could make it if the Jaguars win the division. If the Jaguars don't, because then the Jaguars, the Jaguars, for them to make the division, they would need the Steelers and the Broncos to lose. So they have to win or have both the Steelers and Broncos lose. So that's that. But yeah, as far as seeding goes, the Bills do lose a tiebreaker to both the Colts and the Texans, because they're going to either be 7-5, 8-4. If the Bills lose and they can't get the 2 seed, they're going to be 6-6. Soon as they make the playoffs by virtue of a Steelers or Jaguars loss, then yeah. By the way, is it possible for the Bills and Jaguars to both fill the wild card spot? This is where I'm getting really confused, because the Jaguars losing, the Bills don't factor into it. And the Bills need a Jaguars loss. A Jaguars loss drops them to 9-8. So, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I really don't see how. These scenarios are really confusing my brain. Last year was so much simpler, where you had the AFC South between the Titans and Jaguars, and in the final wildcard spot where the Jaguars had an outside chance if they lost, but it was mainly between the Patriots, Dolphins, and Steelers. This year is so much more complicated, and we have less teams in the running, but there's just more complex scenarios. As the NFC, I'd say it's great that we have more teams who are alive in Week 18. Last year was literally just the Seahawks, Packers, and Lions who hadn't clinched who are still alive. But this year, there's so much more on the line. But it makes it really complicated for my brain. So, the 2 seed is going to be either the Dolphins or the Bills. If the Dolphins lose, they get the 6 seed. If the Bills lose, they're 7 or out. It just gets complicated. So, the Dolphins and Bills could play. If the Dolphins beat the Bills, the Jaguars win, and then the Steelers get out. That could force a 2-7, in which case the Bills are playing away. And given how they're playing in Miami at Hard Rock, if they had just lost to Miami, they are going to be underdogs. And the reason why they're going to be underdogs is because they literally just lost to Miami in Miami, and now they'll be playing them in Miami again, and I don't really expect anything to change. When the Eagles and Giants play each other in Week 18, and then they play each other in the divisional round, the Eagles beat the Giants. When the Bengals-Ravens in Week 18, and then you went to the wild card round, the Bengals win. So, you have that, of course, going for you. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. This is a really confusing scenario. Chiefs are locked into the 3 seed. So who could they be playing? Well, the Dolphins lose, it's them, Chiefs-Dolphins. And in that case, I think that the Dolphins would be the ones who have to pull the upset here. Again, that AFC East battle is huge. Bills could be either 2 or out, or I guess the 7th seed. And if some weird scenario happens, they could be the 6th seed. If it's Chiefs-Bills in Arrowhead, I actually do think that the Bills could get that upset. Although the Bills have dominated the Chiefs in the regular season, and they have not had that same success in the postseason. So that might tip it over in favor of the Chiefs. Depends on how healthy they are. Obviously, if the Bills lose to Miami, they just snapped a huge win streak in their favor, and they pretty much lost all their momentum going forward. So that's not easy to say. But the Buffalo Bills, if they're 6th seed, but I don't think it's going to happen. Now, Chiefs-Dolphins, I think that the Chiefs are going to win, because the Chiefs actually did beat the Miami Dolphins, and they beat them in Europe. And the Miami Dolphins, they struggle against good teams, and they'll be playing on the road, and they pretty much would not have much momentum going for them at all. They shut out the Jets in Week 15, and that's amazing. And then they had a nail-bitingly close game against the Cowboys and got squished by the Ravens. They lost to the Ravens by 37 points. That is a 5-score game. That is a 5-score game. You need to have 5 touchdowns and make at least two of the 2-point conversions if you want to overcome that. That's 5 scores. No team has ever come back from being down 37 before. And only the Vikings have completed a 5-score comeback. That was crazy. But, you just got to look at it, give it some perspective, and just think as to, the fact that we have that could happen. Now, if the Bills win and if the Bills lose, it's more likely not going to be the Colts Texans winner, which is an absolute toss-up. Again, I'm saying that it's probably going to be the Colts just based on home field advantage and the fact that the Colts beat the Texans, but honestly, it could go any way possible for this. And the Colts, they've really made a comeback on their season, even more so than the Texans have. And the Colts have been a lot less appreciated for it. But this game on Saturday Night Football is going to determine who makes the playoffs and who stays home. And I think that it's so tense because you have the Colts and the Texans, 2 teams that have had failure. Sure, the Colts have had more playoff success than the Texans have, but again, it's just going to be such an interesting game. Having said that, in 2022, a better Chiefs went up against the worst Colts and Texans. They lost to the Colts, and the Texans dragged them to overtime. This year, things have changed, but the Chiefs have gotten worse. Now, they didn't play head-to-head this season, but based on the way the Chiefs have been playing, I actually want to say that if the Chiefs go up against the Colts or the Texans, which is a pretty likely scenario, they might actually get upset in the wild card round. Like, it's hard to think of Patrick Mahomes not being able to make it into the AFC Championship, but they could get an upset in the wild card round, with these teams that are going to be, again, coming back from a lot. Yes, the Texans got their ass kicked by the Browns, but the Browns are a very good team. And the Browns are most likely going to be going up against the Jaguars. Possible they face the Texans or the Colts. No matter who they go up against, I think the Browns are going to win that game. I think that whoever wins the AFC South is going to be the underdog against this very strong Cleveland team that is very likely to be 12-5. At worst, they're 11-6, and they still have a better record than anyone in the AFC South is ever going to have. And just to think of Cleveland in this position, you have so many underdogs here that are going to the playoffs. It's amazing. So many teams that won last year that had great seasons are out of it. I mean, look at the Cincinnati Bengals as a team. Look at the Los Angeles Chargers. I know the Chargers didn't make any noise. The Bengals made serious noise in the playoffs, and now they're out of it this year. And it's not just because of Joe Burrow's injury. It's also because they played like total shit under Joe Burrow, and they could only go to 5-5 before he got his injury. The Bengals could not build a dynasty. The Bengals could not build a dynasty around Joe Burrow, and that's what's happening to them. Whereas the Bills are actually able to build a dynasty. The Buffalo Bills are actually able to build a dynasty around Josh Allen. Not saying it's the best dynasty, and there needs to be more work to become an official dynasty, and if they don't make the playoffs, then yeah, it's a failed dynasty, but they're getting close to dynasty level. All they need to do is have one big postseason game, and they're pretty much a dynasty, or at least a dynasty to the AFC. One that can rival the Chiefs dynasty. Now, that's the Chiefs. Now, 7th seed, I don't know who it's even going to go up against, be at this point, because the Steelers would need the Bills loss to make the playoffs, but all they could do is make the 7th seed, either the Steelers loss or a Jaguars loss, and they need to win. But who could the 7 seed really be? Because Colts and Texans is probably going to be 6, but it could be 7. And if they go up against, if they're going up against, if they get the 6 seed because if the 7 seed because the Dolphins win, they're going up against the Bills, Colts, Texans. It's hard to say who's going to win. Probably the Bills, just based on their home field advantage. Plus, the Bills did beat the Colts in the 2020 wild card, but when it was another 2-7 split. But it's hard to say definitively what's going to happen to Buffalo or to Indy. It's hard to say. Again, you have two just strong teams. You have two strong teams, and it's not clear what's going to happen between them. But at least as far as another team goes, oh my God, I'm about to get run over by a fire truck. This is crazy. Or they're just backing it up. Alright, I'm not getting hit by a fire truck. But as far as that goes, hard to say what's going to happen if the Bills wind up winning that game. Again, lots of total toss-ups and confusion. The Steelers could get a 7 seed, but it's unlikely. If the Steelers do, are they going to beat the Bills or the Dolphins? Probably not. I don't know what happened to Dolphins Steelers this game, but which team won that game? Probably Pittsburgh, to be honest. Probably Pittsburgh. Although you don't even remember if the Dolphins and Steelers. No, wait, no. The Dolphins and Steelers didn't play this year. Because the Steelers finished third last year. Oh, I'm a total idiot. Shame on me. Anyway. Oh my God. And that's just the AFC. Where we have some spots secured. Just because of that total mess. In the NFC, it's even worse. So the 49ers are the 1 seed. 2 seed, the Cowboys losing to the Commanders is unlikely. Eagles, Giants, I think the Eagles are going to win. But they have a better chance of losing to the Giants than the Cowboys do of losing to the Commanders, who have not won a game since week 9. On those grounds, hate to say it, Eagles are not clinching the playoffs. So I'm going to make the assumption that the Cowboys get 2, the Lions get 3, and the Eagles get 5. Now, for the NFC South, it's probably going to be the Buccaneers. They have to go up against a pretty easy Carolina Panthers team that's 2-14 on the season. Meanwhile, the Falcons and Saints would have to then win and go up, it gets complicated. So the Atlanta Falcons, I think are a team that, I think if for some reason they want it being the Saints, and then the Buccaneers somehow lose, I think that the Eagles should be able to take care of an 8-9 team. That's like the only case though where I'd say the Eagles are not total underdogs, just because of how weak Atlanta would be going into the playoffs. That's the only scenario, as a matter of fact, in which I would say that that Philadelphia is not really the underdog. It's because Atlanta lost to the Panthers and now they lost to the Bears. So they've lost to pretty weak teams. The Bears they carried the playoffs, but they literally had the Falcons. And while I say the Falcons' path to the playoffs is certainly very narrow, indeed, they could still make that run for it. But the Falcons playoffs, it's unlikely. But should the Falcons make it, that's the only scenario in which I can see Philadelphia not being the underdogs here. Because the Saints beat us last year when we didn't have Jalen Hurts. I mean, we have Jalen Hurts, but our defense is playing like shit. New Orleans might have one of the worst head coaches, but our coaching staff might be up there as we're about to literally just tank on the season. But realistically, who's winning it? The Buccaneers. Yes, we beat the Buccaneers at home in Tampa in Week 3. And yes, the Buccaneers and Eagles are both 2-0 heading into that game. But the Buccaneers, after having a slump, have come back to life in a big way to be able to be in a position to, put down the to put down the Falcons and Saints, who both dreamed of having the division, by going on a 4-game win streak to go from 4-7 to 8-7. Their loss to the Saints shakes it up in what could have been otherwise a surefire division clinch. But going up against the Panthers, I think they'll be able to get their footing stable again and be able to just ride that one off to the sunset. Because, the Panthers are the Panthers, and they suck. Also, shame on Houston for losing to the Texans, for losing to the Panthers. LMAO. Now, in the case of the, the Bucks, most likely opponent, I feel like we've gotten so much worse since then. At the start of 2023, we were playing like we did as the 2022 Eagles. Now we're playing like the 2020 Eagles, and I don't like that. And the only reason why we're making the playoffs is because we played so good at the first part. It's just so hard for a 10-7 team to totally miss it. And that would be if we lost out starting to the 49ers. We've come pretty close to doing that. But, 12-5 or 11-6? Again, very unlikely that we're going to win our division. And even if we do, we're going to be home underdogs against a very powerful, and resurgent Rams, a Packers team. Who knows who else will play. But I think that we're going to be stuck as the 5 seed and playing the NFC South winner. The 6 seed is probably going to be the Rams, who are going up against Detroit. But the Rams could fall to 7 if they lose to the 49ers, which might happen. And then the Packers win. Then they'll get the 6 seed. They'll put the Packers against the Lions. Otherwise, the Packers are playing the Cowboys if they win. If they lose, though, Rams clinch the 6 seed and they're going up against Detroit almost certainly. And in that case, I think that the Rams will be underdogs. Sure, they're a resurgent team, but they won a home field advantage, and the Lions are a very resurgent team. It's going to be a game, though. That'll be a game to tell, though, who won the Matthew Stafford trade. Was it the Lions or was it the Rams? And that playoff game is going to tell you who it was. You had the Rams, the Lions and the Rams, a huge favor that got them to win in Super Bowl 56. Rams failed to help the Lions in 2022 to get into the postseason. Now it's 2023, and they could be squaring off against each other, and that is going to be an exciting game. Actually, no matter who it is, it'll be an exciting game. Seahawks-Cowboys, they're not the biggest rival, but the Seahawks don't like the Cowboys. Now it's a good game. Nonetheless, I think that, again, in AT&T, anyone who's going up against the Cowboys is going to be an underdog. So I think the Seahawks are going to be an underdog. If for some reason they both lose and it somehow goes to a crazy team like the Saints are underdogs. It's that simple. Now, Packers-Lions, I think that we're going to see... I think the Packers be underdogs against the Lions. In that case of Rams-Cowboys, I think the Rams are going to be underdogs in that case. But I think that, the most likely team to pull off an upset, it's definitely not going to be the Eagles. But it's hard to say what's going to happen.